Whatever the Fed is doing, it's not working. And the Fed, spineless flop and Fed Chair Jerome Powell, who knowingly and incorrectly labeled inflation as transitory, is overseeing a series of rate hikes, which total 5 this year alone, and we're about to have the 6th. It's probably going to be 75 basis points in the next 3 weeks. And these hikes, are they having the intended effect of cooling the economy? If by cooling you mean exacerbating inflation, then yeah, they're doing a bang-up job. It's too little, too late. And you're the one who's going to suffer the consequences, unfortunately. Wholesale prices went up by a little bit more than expected last month. That means inflation's still on the rise. Mortgage rates have also gone up. So while it's difficult to feed your family or travel to see grandma this Christmas, it's impossible to buy a house. The 30-year fixed is at 6.81%. That has doubled since the beginning of the year. And if money is this expensive to borrow, that means housing prices will crater, that market will collapse, and the economy will come to a halt in short order. The only lifeline a majority of Americans have is adding to their income through gig work. You know, driving a Lyft or cleaning homes or assembling furniture as a TaskRabbit. But now the federal government wants to throw cold water on that as well and punish workers and small businesses by designating independent contractors, also known as gig workers, as employees. This will force businesses, particularly the littler variety, to freeze hiring. They're also going to fire workers. And just like the unintended consequences of minimum wage laws, the newly employed and older Americans will be the first blades of grass to meet the mower. Gig workers get to work for different companies and set their own hours. And when people are trying to save money, they can work longer hours when they want without the fuss budgetry of arbitrary government regulation. There are 20 million independent contractors hustling in this economy, and 56% of them have 2 or more jobs. Well, now the Labor Department wants to make that level of free association more difficult, even though employers and contractors are engaging in consensual transactions together that benefit all sides. The federal government, especially one that's run by Democrats, hell-bent on filling up the political kitty with union contributions, they will do everything in their power, their growing power, to force people into boxes and make them unionize. That is, if they can keep their jobs. The White House and the Fed have caused this inflationary mess, and now the Labor Department is doing the bidding of large labor unions to dampen the few bright prospects struggling Americans have. Anything that is good and innovative will be crushed by progressivism, especially something like gig work that is widely misunderstood by the old power-mad coots in Washington who've never seen a great new idea they didn't long to destroy. Put these geriatric elites out of work and let Nancy Pelosi put IKEA furniture together instead of ruining lives from her evil lair in D.C. And that's the memo. Yeah. Oh, President Biden, remember him? My son, Beau. Yeah. Well, he's finally admitting the economy is not as rosy as he wants everyone to believe. In fact, in a brand new interview, the president telling us something most of us already know: a recession is probably coming. Thanks, genius.
I don't think there will be a recession. If it is, it'll be a very slight recession. That is, we'll move down slightly.
But you just said that a slight recession is possible.
So it is possible. Look, it's possible. I don't anticipate it.
It's not possible. It's probable. And that's definitely not the ideal message with just under a month till the midterms. So with the economy so shaky, why would the White House want to kill the gig economy and all the jobs and freedom that goes with it? Let's meet tonight's party panel. We've got conservative strategist and Z Lab's vice president of PR, Chris Barron, is back. It's officially hockey season. I know he's pleased. We've got former State Department deputy spokesperson and Fox News contributor. Her Buckeyes will someday meet my Bruins in the Big Ten. Marie Harf is back as well. And we've got Reason editor-in-chief and co-host of the phenomenal Reason Roundtable podcast, Catherine Mangu-Ward. All right, let's get straight into it. So, Chris, they have been so wrong and misguided on inflation. I actually worry that this has gotten out of their control. So why would they counter the bad messaging and the bad decisions with something that could harm workers who are doing their best to set their own hours?
Because at a certain point, we have to understand that this is the objective. You know, in the same way that Obamacare was intended to destroy the healthcare system so that we'd end up having to move to a single payer system. This is exactly what they're attempting to do here, is to destroy the capitalist economy here in this country. There's no other explanation for it. There's no other explanation for lying to the American people and ignoring the problems of inflation as they torched the values in this country. And then all of a sudden, everything they've done to supposedly combat it, they know has only made it worse. And then they do things like light a fire to the gig economy. At some point, we have to start saying to ourselves, is this just incompetence? Mm-hmm. Are they just so bad and so dumb that they don't know what they're doing? Or is there something more nefarious going on here? Is the goal to prove that capitalism is broken and it doesn't work because they broke it?
Yes, and they continue to break it. So, Marie, why do you hate old people?
Well, today Uber came out with a statement, Uber, of course, being one of the biggest employers in the gig economy, saying this was actually a pretty measured approach, and it would just take us back to where we were in the Obama years when Uber and other gig-based companies made a ton of money. So this is not destroying the gig economy. What it's doing is helping workers get things like health care or retirement benefits. When you're a gig worker and you're an independent contractor, you don't get any of those things. And so this is an attempt to make a very sort of moderate change back to what the Obama administration had when these companies made huge windfall profits, while at the same time protecting workers who have spent a ton of their own money on healthcare costs, for example, because many of them don't have insurance, on things like not having retirement savings, right? So trying to make that balance a little better for workers who have suffered a lot and give them some of those benefits that, quite frankly, many of them are performing as true full employees, and they should be compensated as such. Sometimes companies take advantage of independent contractors to not provide those things.
Yes, I understand that, but you are forcing two parties who want to engage in these transactions to do something that benefits big business entirely. What is your take, Catherine?
You know, call me old-fashioned, but I think if two entities want to enter into a contract, that should be allowed. And that's what the gig economy is. It's people who want to work and people who want to employ them coming together on terms that they agree on. I think that, you know, contra earlier statements, I actually do think it's incompetence. I think that this is just a constant temptation by politicians to think that they know better how the economy should work and how jobs should be structured. The fact is that rules like this do not turn gig jobs into glorious, perfect, cushy, full-time jobs. They kill gig jobs. Yes. They kill that part of the economy, or at least they handicap it. They slow it down. They reduce innovation in that space, and that's not good for anyone.
No, and this is one of the few spaces in the economy where there is innovation. And that's what I don't understand, is people like Elizabeth Warren who don't understand things like gig work and like crypto will do whatever they can to squash it. You know, which goes to my point last night. If you have people who don't understand paradigm shifts and generational shifts and things like the economy and how the economy itself fuels innovation, then those people who can stop it, they need to be voted out of office. They need to be moved out of the way because they are doing so much more harm than good to people who could use the extra work. There are seniors, you know, sure, maybe they retired from their giant businesses they've worked for 40 years, but maybe they want to pick up a few hours a week driving a Lyft, and they should be able to do that. Unless, of course, they're women. Women should not be able to drive.